The ARI panel with Matt Jordan, Nir, and is it Gaston? Yeah. Gaston. I will take your questions on this mic, and they will do their best to answer them. Who's got a question? Or actually, let's do this first. Sorry. Can I get each one of you to introduce yourself a little bit about what you know about ARI, what you've done? Yeah, I know that's really funny.
Awkward. So, as Scott said, I'm Matt Jordan. I'm Director of Technology at Digium. I am not the person who actually wrote ARI. That person is in the back of the room, and I will not point to him. So when I answer incorrectly about something, he can throw stones at me. But the actual architect of ARI is in the room. It's just not the person standing up front here. I'm just the puppet. That being said, I did actually write a lot of the code in ARI, so hopefully I'll be able to answer anybody's questions today. I'll pass it off to Nir here then.
Hi, I'm Nir. I'm the CEO of Greenfield Technologies in Israel. I'm the creator of PHP ARI, which is a PHP framework for developing ARI stasis applications and working with ARI. And Matt helped me a lot to write that and getting things done properly as they should be. And if you have questions regarding that or how to work with ARI and things we can build it. Nobody hears it? Yeah, okay, thanks. So these questions you can point on to me.
Hi, my name is Gus. I was here before, so I work for Nexicom, a New York-based company, and I basically use what these guys write.
That's awesome.
Do we have any questions to start off with?
Yeah, there was a question at the end of the last discussion about performing answering machine detection using ARI. So if we don't have anybody who's willing to be brave enough to volunteer a question first, I can throw out a couple thoughts on that if people are interested. Does that sound good? Okay. So does anybody know how answering machine detection in Asterisk works? When you call app AMD, what does it actually do? So yeah, I didn't know that. It goes both directions, by the way. So I'm going to ask you questions too. Anybody? We got one far side? Okay.
Yeah, can you hear me? We're good to go? Yeah, the AMD, it uses a combination of listening to the introduction, tries to identify if it's a human at first, and it's not really beep detection, it's more of silence detection and listening for silence intervals.
That's absolutely correct, right? So it's doing talk detection. And so it has a number of little levers you can pull in order to try to tell it, this is the sequence that I expect answering machines to have. And I think it's going to have this much silence, and then there'll be a greeting, and then there'll be another piece of silence. And if I match all these things, then, oh, it's an answering machine, and I'll bail. So what we added in ARI, I want to say it was 13.4-ish, maybe. So there's actually a new dial plan function called talk detect. And you can attach that to a channel, and you'll start getting events over the WebSocket when that channel has energy on it and when it drops back down to silence. And so in ARI, you'll get events saying the person's talking, the person's not talking, the person's talking, the person's not talking. And with that, too, you can selectively do it whenever you want it on a particular channel. And you can use that for talk detection, for conferencing to like enable a BLF if somebody starts talking, or for answering machine detection. The great thing about dial plan functions is that you can use them in any of Asterisk's APIs. So you could also do this in AMI, you could do it in ARI, because you can call dial plan functions through ARI. So that's how we would probably recommend people to do it today. The nice thing about that, too, is that you're not relying on Asterisk having logic that might get wrong for your scenario embedded in the C code, right? You have all the capabilities to go do whatever you want with that little events that it spills back. Okay, I'll hand it back off to the floor.
Yesterday, there was a presentation on converting from ChanSIP to PJSIP, and there was a brief discussion at the end on how to go about adding extra SIP headers to outbound calls. And the method that was presented was a bit ugly. It involved various pre-dial nastiness in extensions.conf. Is there an elegant way to add extra SIP headers from within ARI? And if not, would you consider adding it?
I hadn't done anything like that. No. Never had the need to.
Variables originate.
Yeah, you can do that.
So to what John, I was going to let Near or Gaston here chime in, but if you guys aren't using it, then that yeah. So as Josh there just shouted out at me, you can, when you create a channel, when you post to the channels resource, specify that you want to add variables to that channel during its creation. One of the nice things about the PJ SIP stack is that rather than having a dial plan application that then goes and sets it, it's again a dial plan function, which means you can use that function directly when you create the channel. And that should add headers to the particular channel before it goes out and sends out the invite request. So it should be doable.
Is it possible to record each channel in a bridge to a separate channel in the WAV file using ARI?
Technically, you can do that. You can. Anybody can? Okay. Technically, you can do that, but you will need, when you connect, before you connect the bridges, you need to create the bridge. Then you go about and you say, okay, I'll add the channels in, but you need to start the recording before they're in the bridge if you want separate files. So each one will be recorded on its own. That's one way. I've got a different question for you. Why would you like to do that?
Voice analytics are easier when you have each speaker in their own channel.
Oh, okay. That's reasonable. Yeah.
No, yeah, there's we had a client a couple of years ago that had to do with 9/11, and that was one of the requirements. So that's another scenario that I would use it for, because usually they require both channels to be in separate recordings.
Just as a FYI, there is what Near said is one way of doing it. There is another way where you could use Snoop channels. So you could attach a Snoop channel to each channel that goes into the bridge and then record the Snoop channel. And then so each speaker's, and when you attach a Snoop channel, you can specify the direction of the audio that you want to snoop on. So you could take the audio from each person as it's going into the bridge and pipe it out directly to particular files, and then their audio is still getting mixed into the bridge.
Any other questions?
I saw in your online roadmap you want to add text-to-speech in the next version of the ARI. What else is coming, if anything?
Yeah, you're in DEF CON, weren't you?
I couldn't even write anything
Okay.
while in DEF CON.
So we had DEF CON yesterday, or no, 2 days ago. Time flies. Text-to-speech was certainly, and if you're really interested in text-to-speech as well as speech recognition, the person also to talk to here about that concept is Mr. Ben Klang of Mojo Lingo. They're very interested and keen in that idea as well. Being an open source project, contributions can come from anywhere. Digium is not the only group of people who can contribute to the Asterisk REST API or go enhance it, right? We're an open source project. If there's something you need it to go do, anybody can go take it, modify it, submit the patch up to Git. We'd love it, right? So certainly text-to-speech and speech recognition, though, is high on a number of people's interest, and that's certainly something we're very interested in, too. Now, that's not a promise. That's just, it's a really good idea. Another one that actually has come up several times that I think is a very interesting idea is the ability to actually be able to push and pull media through the actual files through the REST API. And so, as an example, if I leave a recording, I want to actually be able to go to the REST API and get the actual recording off the server just through that, right? Now, you could do a lot of other different ways of doing that, and, set up like a little mini FTP server on Asterisk, or write your own little other daemon that sits there and it grabs the files. But it'd be nice if it was just right through the API, because I've already got the stored recording object and I know when it was finished. The ability to actually have Asterisk pull media from another source. So and this kind of goes to Gaston's point in his talk as well. One of the great things about ARI is that you can treat Asterisk as a black box and then just have a whole bunch of them. Media makes that hard, right? Because if I've got to go put a sound file on every single Asterisk instance, now it's kind of a pain, right? So it'd be much nicer to have something that actually maintains my media and have Asterisk just go grab it off that server when it needs it. And then, again, Asterisk is just a black box, and you can have these different separation of concerns. So that's a couple of the things that have been talked about possible future enhancements to ARI. actually, I'll ask these two guys, since you've been actually building things with ARI. I'll ask these two guys, since you guys have actually been building things in ARI, what other things have you run into that you might think you might want in ARI as well?
Well, the be able to record to retrieve media from a separate server, that's definitely one, and we solved it by like you did, like you said, by building our own daemon and having that one take the file from a separate server. I definitely don't have imagination. You're the guys writing it, so just use whatever you build. So far, we've been very excited with being able to do what we had to do in the past with the C libraries from the outside. That in itself has been revolutionary. I'm not sure we're still getting the most out of it.
I can say from the past 2 days, and mainly because people had been coming up with main questions regarding to ARI, is that in my respect is the documentation still lacks. It's like the caveat of everything that we do. Like we write a lot of stuff, and documentation is always this last thing we try to do, and we do it really fast, and then we just miss something. And the thing is that people still don't understand that ARI is not your normal AMI or AGI replacement, because it's not. It's a completely different beast. And the thing is that one of the things that a lot of people were talking about, for example, last night we were having dinner and somebody asked me, can I get conf bench events over ARI? And I go, no, that's something else. It's not supposed to be there. You want events from a conf bench and rewrite conf bench yourself using ARI, which isn't that, it's not that difficult to do. But the thing is that the thing that I think that lacks the most, it's not more feature set, because the feature set is fairly rich right now, and it will be extended and so on, text-to-speech and speech recognition and so on. The primary thing that I think, and this is something that throws back, I'm not throwing it back to Digium, because Digium cannot do everything on their own. I'm throwing this back into the community, is that we expect more of you guys to come in and you work with ARI and contribute back into the project saying, hey guys, this function is documented wrong. This is not what it does exactly. Just change that. And this is where we need your ability and your capabilities of helping us do it right. PHP ARI, and Mark is sitting here in the audience, who had contributed, I think, like 4 or 5 different pull requests into the project, and he pointed out various mistakes or errors that I've made inside. Also, Scott helped out. So this is a community effort. We all need to pull in together. And if all of you, if most people just sit down and say, okay, do this, do that, and just, I won't say complain, but only ask stuff without contributing back, it won't go as fast and as forward as you want it to be. This is your ability to help this project. Not only say what will happen in the future, you can dictate what will happen in the future.
So a question for the audience then. If you have tried building something on ARI, what was confusing? Have you had a point of confusion when you were approaching it? It was perfect, right? There was no problems whatsoever. Well, we can drop the mic and go home then.
I thought the entire world was in my presentation yesterday, but you must not have been there, Matt. But it felt like everyone was staring at me. I went over about 10 different things that I, as a brand new to Asterisk, brand new to ARI person, was confused about and how to solve it. And then, as Nir said, I've already contributed back what I have to, at least to him. So I might have to do some more work with you guys. The biggest thing that I have seen, and everyone has come up to me and asked personally, I know I'm not up there, but is I don't understand the high-level process of using ARI. I understand that I have to react to events, but how do I do that? And what does the actual pattern look like as far as I'm reacting to events, but I also need to send requests? Do I do those in the same place, or are those separate processes? That sort of thing I've got asked 15 times in the last 24 hours. So that's the number one big thing that I'm filtering up to you now.
No, I appreciate that.
Thanks.
To that actually specific point, if you don't mind, I'll answer. And I saw the gentleman up here also had a question along that same line. You know, when I'm writing an ARI application, generally what we'll do is, you know, we use Node.js a lot. That's we do a lot of Node.js stuff at Digium, and being an asynchronous event-driven kind of thing fits very well with the model of ARI. Generally, you basically have event handlers, and in that event handler, you go take particular actions. But we try to keep it very thin, right? You don't want this gigantic callback nested stuff, right? And so a lot of times it is very much things like what the state of stuff or what is actually tracking all of that, we'll write that in other modules and place out other things. And then you'll have very thin event callbacks that actually try to dispatch out back to Asterisk based on whatever event just occurred. Now, that's if you have a very reactive application. I think Gaston should probably answer this question as well. But I would guess that if I'm doing a dialer, it's not as reactive. Certain parts of it are reactive, but certain parts are not. So I'll hand it over to him.
Yeah, that is true. If it gets complicated and if it gets into an EVR and interactions, then it gets more reactive. And I'll also pick on the Node.js part because we've been and we still do a lot of Node.js and we really like it. But the pattern that he's referring to that solves it, right? Like the promises and. So it definitely choosing the language that you will build in, because that I believe is one confusion. Like ARI provides you the REST API and the events, right? And then you can go and see the data model, and so you know what you're dealing with. And you might run into one piece of documentation that doesn't exactly do what you want, and there's where Near's, I believe he's right. You should try and get back that to the community. But when you pick a programming language, it really makes a difference. Patterns are really different. Like, for instance, we all understand what he's talking about regarding nesting and callbacks in Node.js, but if you do that in Golang, that disappears. There's no such a thing. Right, because you have your Go routines. Then you, like I said in my presentation, then you have other problems, right? Then you have other problems, and you think, why do I have to take care of what's going on in each core? Since when do I care about that? And then you have to take care about that. So it would definitely shift between one programming language and another. And another thing that I believe I mentioned in my presentation, I saw in Engel's presentation yesterday, which amazes me, is what a great work this guy right next to me did with PHP ARI. When I saw it, we had a fight at the office. Like the front end guy was going, but PHP ARI, now I get to do your stuff. What are you talking about? And he goes, no, and he writes a very simple application really fast, and I was really amazed of how many things his library is doing. Like the one we're doing just doesn't do that. Like most of those things we have to take care of. So one thing that I saw that maybe it's some miscommunication there is people believe that since the ARI API is simple, it's REST and there's events, then it's an easy ride. And I agree with him. The first application you build, it's a joyride, right? Because all of a sudden you're in charge of everything. And so the way you start your application, the pattern you choose, it makes a lot of difference. If you don't take that under consideration when you're starting, well, you probably won't get that far. At least that's my take on it.
There's just one thing I like to add is that when I started working with ARI for the first time, I had the same issue. What is the actual flow here? How do you make that thing work? Do I listen to events first? Do I need to connect? What's going on in there? And I can give you a little advice that helped me a lot, is that I started looking at Asterisk as a web client and looking at my Stasis application as a very fancy JavaScript-enabled web page. Think of it as, well, I'll give a very bad example right now, as the U.S. visa application. When you go to the U.S. Embassy website, and there's this form, there are like 200 parts in there that you have to fill out, and it's all asynchronous. You put a character in, starts filling in stuff, and this is exactly what ARI, a Stasis application, should do. You should you should listen to what Asterisk says and listen for the callbacks and react according to those. Sometimes you initiate something as an originate and then you start listening to the event. Sometimes you get a call in, activate the stasis application, and you mimic a dial and you re-implement it, and according to the events you do it again. But the flow is always the same. You go in, you connect to it, you start listening to the first event, either you're listening to it or you're actioning out something and then reacting according to the result. The flow is, if you think about it that way, it will make life a lot easier, regardless of which language you decide to use, be it Node.js or Go or PHP, it doesn't really matter.
You said a few minutes ago that ARI is not a replacement for AGI. And I understand that that's a positioning that works for short term, but in the longer term, does it make sense to keep 3 different interfaces, or at some point ARI is going to replace yours?
So I'll say a little bit on that, and then I'll hand it off to the 2 guys next to me here, because I think they have some very practical thoughts on that question. As the project lead for Asterisk, one of the things that I am very concerned about is the ability for people to upgrade and to take their existing platforms that they've invested millions of dollars in and building and continue to be able to use that and have a path forward. Now, Asterisk 12 and 13 are huge, major architectural changes that happened under the hood. There are some changes that rippled out into the APIs. In particular, AGI was left exactly the same. AMI events got they came out a completely different looking beast. They look the same, actually, it's just a different beast now. But that was actually that was one of the purposes for 12 and 13, was to actually really go provide semantic reasoning behind the AMI events so that you had very predictable lifetimes for everything. So we knew that was going to be a big upgrade pain for people. But it was worth it. We felt like that was something that was worth doing. But generally, and this is why I say ARI is not a replacement for AGI and AMI, is really what I'm trying to drive home when I say that, is that we're not going to go remove them. Because if I do that, probably the vast majority of people in this room are now looking at a major engineering effort to go upgrade their platform. And you can't just do you can't take an upgrade and then bite off a little bit of ARI, see how it works for you. You have to go commit to doing the entire thing. And that is a very disruptive thing to do to your user base. So that's kind of why I say that. But I'll since these guys actually build these platforms, I'll also hand it off to them on that thought as well.
I'm going to give you a very weird analogy to this. Do you have a refrigerator at home? Do you have a deep freeze at home? A deep freezer. You know what that is? So anybody own a deep freeze at home? Hands up. So a deep freeze is basically only a freezer. It's like a small refrigerator, only a freezer. Now I'm going to ask you, does a deep freeze replace your freezer in your refrigerator? The answer is no. Why? Because the refrigerator is more accessible and it freezes things a little differently. And again, these are 2 different beasts. And now, Matt is talking what's called sake of compatibility, backward compatibility, and keeping whatever was done in the past. Yes, of course, but these are 3 different tools. Like previously, Gaston talked about the knife, the katana, and the chainsaw. So it's an awesome analogy. So, for example, doing something in AGI is very much a knife, and doing the same thing with AMI or async AGI or with ARI is taking a chainsaw and just hacking at it, because sometimes it's not the right tool. I've seen a lot of people going about and writing stuff that would usually go into dial plan, would do it in AGI. Why? Because they think it's a better tool. It's not necessarily. Sometimes it's not the right tool. If the only thing I need to do is route between contexts, why would it use an AGI? I'll just use background and do it with a simple playback. There's no point in doing that. It's all a question of design. It's a question of how you go about and say, okay, this is what I need to do. This is the best tool to do this specific job. Don't try to look for one tool that will encompass everything, because the only thing you'll achieve is over-engineering. And your platform will be so complex to maintain that the minute you leave that company, it will go bankrupt. It's very good for job security, but very bad for technology and very bad for future enhancements.
Well, I have another. No, I don't have another analogy. That was it. I believe more tools is better. I mean, I like tools, so it's important to know them all. If you can master them all, then so much better. But from somebody that actually needs professionals as well, right? Somebody who needs to hire professionals as well. Shooting those APIs in the head is not good for the project. It's definitely not good for the companies. It's not good for the people that have learned them. It's not good for all of the applications out there that costs a lot of money to build. And many of them work fine with AMI and AGI. And they've been, come on, we've been doing pretty good with our ARI, right? So I would definitely not replace them. And back in the day, there was a conversation about that and the dial plan, which I personally, and I say this again in public, I think it's stupid. The dial plan still has a place. It makes sense. I don't think any of these APIs go in anywhere really. The effort that's been done over AMI makes a lot of sense. And that in itself doesn't mean that people will have to modify some of their applications at some point also. But I don't see ARI as, because let's put it this way. If that were the case, then why don't we just let AGI go and AMI go and every API go and just use the C libraries? So I don't see that in that direction, so I don't think it's going to work in the other direction either. So that's my point on it.
We have another 5 minutes. Any other questions?
Can I ask a question from the audience?
Sure.
Okay, so I know Mark clearly has done some pretty awesome things with ARI. Has anybody else in the audience built an application with ARI yet? Sean? Steve, you don't count. For the people who raised your hands, and I think we have some questions back there too, but I'll ask one last question. Did you build something that would replace an existing dial plan application, or was it something that Asterisk could not do previously that you went and engineered instead?
So we run a fairly large termination company, and route testing is very important. But testing routes is either a API-driven automated thing that doesn't give you very good answers. So there's a lot of dialing. Is this working? What are you getting? So we automated it whereby somebody logs in on a queue and waits there. And by just, when one of our CRMs is reviewing the routes, they can initiate a test from the screen. That then puts the call in the queue. The phone rings, the testers test the queue. That Asterisk then posts back to our system and says, these numbers were tested, this is a success. And the system can then make another decision to put it in a second phase of testing and third phase of testing, etc.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Anybody else?
So I already discussed this in DevCon, but anyway, for the sake of the audience, the two projects that I've done which are ARI focused, the first was in fact replacing a dial plan application app alarm receiver, a very customized version in C that we did several years ago. And we did that entirely in ARI with absolutely no Asterisk code modification whatsoever, which was an enormous relief, much easier upgrade path. No patches to DSP.C, no patches to main.c, no patches to app alarm receiver, and we didn't even have to implement app alarm sender. Anyway, that was an absolutely ideal case for ARI because among other things, we were able to leverage the quick and easy bridging in and out of channels. When we bridge calls from alarm senders, we're very easily able to bridge central station receivers on an ad hoc basis, even with third-line dial-ins from cellular, and just merge those together and separate them, tracking each individual component. So ARI is beautiful for that. The other application is a multi-data center, multi-user, multi-tenant PBX system, in which case the original system was already mostly replacing dial plan applications with AGI, with a mix of AGI and some AMI. And in this case, ARI again offers immensely simpler implementations for all of these things, both for tracking events, for doing extremely custom actions, and for maintaining call state throughout the life cycle of the call. But I would like to mention, because it hasn't really necessarily been covered on the AGI dial plan thing, everybody's kind of talked much to the same point, but they really do address very different needs. AGI, a dial plan is, of course, the most approachable. For anybody can pick up the dial plan and just write things. AGI is not far removed from that, and the idea of stripping out either of those is akin to stripping out availability to Asterisk to a vast swath of people. So much as everyone else has said, it would not be a good plan. They really address completely different needs of users as well as developers.
Hello. Well, we just moved to ARI primarily because most of our apps are, just short call-in apps. Like, for example, a user calls in and just hears a joke or plays a short trivia game. And the problem we had with AGI before was that the extensions.conf file was getting so very large, and every junior developer had to have access to it to do their stuff. So we just went to ARI so that, to manage the development better and sort of separate the access to the core Asterisk stuff to just the seniors, and let the junior developers just use their PHP stuff on connected to the Asterisk servers.
That's really cool. And by the way, to that point, I think you just highlighted something I think is really important, which is, and although Gaston has also brought up some interesting points that kind of contradict what I'm about to say, so I'll hand the mic over to you when I'm done. Is that with ARI, and I mean even with AGI this was true as well, but I think with ARI it's even a little bit more true that you need to know what you're dealing with. You do need to know what these resources are. You need to know that you're responsible for cleaning things up, but you don't have to know everything about Asterisk in order to go build an ARI application. You can work in whatever language you're familiar with, and frankly, there's a lot more Node.js developers or PHP developers out there than there are Asterisk developers. So it allows you to scale out your programming team in a much more effective fashion.
Well, no, I agree. I don't think we don't on that one. As a matter of fact, there was some part that I didn't have time to show, which was I wanted to show instead of showing code, I wanted to show the percentage of the ARI interactions against the code that had to do with the call logic. And in the last dialer that I showed, there are about 800 lines of code, and out of those 800 lines of code, there's only 50 ARI requests. So only 50 times we really say we need to do this, or based on this event, even events included, not only the REST requests, but the events being received and analyzed. So by that I mean that yes, there are a lot of Node.js programmers and there are a lot of PHP programmers, And in the case that I showed, really the part that has to do with what Asterisk needs to do is very little in comparison to the programming, the logic. So in that regards, that's pretty much what I meant when I said that the API is very simple, and you need to take care of everything. But that everything that you need to take care of is what it is that you want to do, is the call flow itself. So, but if you don't know that, then there's nothing you can do.
One more in the back.
I just have one question and something I would like to address about that. That abstraction level from a termination point of view, one of the most frequent things we see amongst our customers is Asterisks being hacked. And this is a growing concern and a common concern amongst termination. That level of abstraction and not like understanding what you're using and how it should be used, is that a concern, and is that something that can be addressed where ARI is abstracting that developer where they should be paying attention to security and more setup and extra features? I don't know.
You're talking about two different things. Let's put this abstraction aside. So ARI abstracts a very significant portion of what Asterisk does and gives you access to it, but I don't think that abstraction introduces security issues. Security issues are introduced by people. Okay, or I'm missing your question. Speak to the mic. It's gone.
Okay. It's more just a case of not creating that much of the abstraction layer. So a common thing, a trend that I've seen amongst developers, a good example is developers that use a lot of frameworks like Active Records and those kind of things. They kind of don't know how to deal with MySQL anymore. And do
you have it?
Yeah, but you see horrible things and horrible messes. I'm just worried is MySQL is not something where security is such a big impact that I expose it to the web. Yes, that is a concern. But Asterisk in itself has to be exposed to the web to be really useful.
No, not at all. Okay, yeah. First of all, let's put, okay, so security inside Asterisk has various aspects, okay? Starting from the basic dial plan security of why you don't write in dial plan _, for example, why you never do that. On one hand, although it exists in some very popular applications all over the place, ranging up to application security, AGI and AMI, how do I secure those? And yesterday, my colleague, Ol, who's sitting here, was presenting an ARI proxy that enables you to provide stronger authentication than the normal basic authentication that the ARI uses. Now, security is not something, it's not something that is built in. ARI is a tool, just like PHP or C or Go or any other programming language or any other interface. Security is your issue. It is not the interface's issue as an interface to say this is insecure or this is secure. It is just an interface. Your doorway to your house, if it's locked, then it's secure. You add another lock to it, it's secure. If you open it wide open, then it's wide open. That's it. It's the same analogy. So I don't think that ARI should think of security as a built-in feature because, okay, so maybe we can add in something like authenticity of requests, saying, okay, this request is coming from an authentic client and so on, just another layer. But it's, again, another layer of complexity that an API shouldn't have. So there's just another moving part that can go broke. And if you said yourself, you see programmers that no longer know how MySQL works. Well, I'm sorry to say, but we cannot stop coders and programmers from being bad programmers. Okay? So when I started working with PHP, everybody was all over the world. Yay, PHP, the best thing ever. And then we had PHP Nuke and other platforms that are so horrible because they were written by people who don't understand how programs should work. and you end up with platforms which are they're not security issues. There are no security issues. They're just broken at the base. So if you hire a developer and he doesn't know what to do, that's your problem. I'm very sorry. You cannot blame Asterisk or ARI for it. If you hired an integrator to put free PBX in and he put on all your dial plan capital T and lowercase t on every dial command, expect to be frauded because that's what you came in. You cannot stop people from being idiots. I'm sorry. That will always happen. Yeah.
And on that, we need to go ahead and close it down. We've got lunch in 7 minutes.
Near closing it out.
Thank you very much.